Hey guys, Tom here from the Investing with Tom YouTube channel. Welcome back to the channel. If you enjoyed today's video, hit like, hit subscribe, and that way you can see future videos as well. So one of the most popular types of videos that I do on the channel all the time is doing our 13F quarterly updates, going through and looking at what top investors over in the US are buying and selling. And in the most recent update video that I did on that topic, one of the top comments was, where is the update from Phil Town? And Phil Town is a little bit tougher to track because he doesn't actually file a 13F, but we have got the latest documents come through displaying Phil Town's both stock and options and actually cash kind of positions as well. So very interesting to have a look at, and that's what we're going to be diving into today. But before we do that, we do have a sponsor for today's video. So today's sponsor is Hatch. Now Hatch have been my broker of choice over in the US for well over a year now, and it allows New Zealanders to buy shares in large US companies. The reason I initially switched across was because of very low fees. I was stuck at a bank paying $90 US a trade to make transactions for buying US shares with that bank. I can do those same transactions now for $3 US in Hatch. So that is why I initially switched across, and I've actually also started recently writing some articles for Hatch. So keep an eye out for those. And one of the new things Hatch are also working on is bringing in the features around kids investment portfolios. So if you're wanting to get compounding working really early for your kids, I will put a link down in the description so that you can keep track of everything Hatch are doing there as well. And we do have an offer from Hatch today. So if you're interested in getting started, you can go to the link hatch.as/investingwithtom. If you sign up and deposit 100 New Zealand dollars into your Hatch account via that link, you will get an additional $20 added to your account so that you can get started investing with a little bit more money. So this video going through Phil Town's Rule 1 fund portfolio is going to be broken down into two parts. The first part, we're going to go into the individual stocks, the individual companies that Phil Town owns, and this filing was as of the end of June 2020, so a little bit of a delay, but similar to the 13Fs, we get a delay as well. We're going to look at what's there at the end of June and how that compares to what was there at the end of March. We also get the opportunity to look at any cash that is in that portfolio as well. And then the second part of the video is going to be getting into Phil Town's options portfolio and talking you through kind of some of the things he's doing there, the companies that he's written put options for, and what it all means for kind of Phil Town's investment portfolio. So firstly, I guess the reason why we can't get a 13F for Phil Town is kind of twofold. So firstly, he's managing less than $100 million, which is the cutoff for 13Fs. He's managing about $68 million as of this filing. And the second thing is that the way that this fund is structured is it's part of sort of this World Funds Trust. So it's a little bit tricky to find the SEC filings, and I have to give a shout out to Brad Kellner, who has already done a video on this topic, by the way, so go and check that out and go and check out Brad's channel, who he sent me this filing after tracking it down, because it is publicly available on the SEC website, but it's a bit of a mission to find. So I appreciate that, Brad. But let's get straight into the stocks and talk you through some of the changes happening there. Hey everyone, Tom here. I'm just actually editing this video, and I'm now realizing that I forgot to include an additional $26 million of other assets that is not in money market funds or stocks or anything, but I think is very likely that it's cash that Phil Town also has on the sidelines. I forgot to include that in some of my calculations I did before filming this video. So when I talk about the percentage that Phil has of his portfolio in a particular stock, the numbers I say out loud are actually going to be slightly incorrect, so I apologize for that, but the numbers you should see pop up on the screen with Excel spreadsheets and stuff, those should be correct. So apologies for any confusion. Turns out Phil Town actually has more like $94 million under management, so it's grown a fair bit since his last filing, but just worth noting, so apologies for that. Let's get back to the video. Now, one of the other downsides with this not being a traditional 13F filing is that I also have to go through and build a spreadsheet to compare the differences. We don't get a nice like web interface from something like Whale Wisdom showing us the differences. I'm just basically going to go through from his largest position to his smallest, and really one of the headlines of this particular update is that Phil Town still has a lot of money sitting on the sidelines. So if we look at money market funds, he has about $35.5 million, or at least he did at the end of June, sitting in money market funds. Now, this is basically short-term money, money that essentially is cash that he can take out in a relatively short space of time in order to make investments. So the biggest position in this portfolio besides the cash holding is a business called Bank OZK, and this is one that has been added to since the last update. Phil Town's gone ahead and increased his position there by 18%, or about 45,000 shares. If you want to see Phil Town's sort of investment thesis on this particular business, I'd recommend you go back and look at his previous filing, which I'll try to leave in the description below as well. And he talks through some of the basics around the management team and how he thinks it's one of the better run banks around there, and some of the things that he thinks in the short term have been pushing their stock price down. So that's Bank OZK. That makes up about 10.2% of the portfolio as of the end of June. Second largest is Sturm Ruger & Co. Now, this is a gun company that I frankly don't know a huge amount about, but we've seen no change in that investment since the last filing. Makes up just under 7% of the portfolio. Now, the next one on the list is Armada Hoffler Properties Inc., and this is a REIT. So, interesting to see a REIT here because I'm looking at one of the other REITs in Phil Town's portfolio at the moment, which is Sharesight Growth Properties. And this has shot up actually above Phil Town's Sharesight position, and it's a brand new stock to the portfolio. So it wasn't there at the end of March, but it is there at the end of June. He's added 365,000 shares. It had a market value of about $3.6 million at the end of June, and it makes up just about 5%, about 5.3% of the portfolio. So I frankly know nothing about that business. I was looking at some of the comments on Brad's video, and someone mentioned that it is possibly to do with a company that is on his wife's sort of side of the family. There's some sort of family involvement there, but I really don't know much about that. So if you do know something about that, feel free to drop it down in the comments below. I would always appreciate that. Next company we have here is Boeing. So Boeing got added to massively. So Boeing shares were up 118%, or the shares that Phil Town owns in this fund were up 118%. Now makes up also about 5% of the portfolio. Boeing have been having a very tough time. Obviously, any sort of travel or airline related business has been getting absolutely hammered recently. Combine that with the fact that Boeing were already struggling because of some of their 737 MAX issues. The stock price has been all over the place, huge volatility in that one, and it looks like Phil Town has taken advantage of that and added substantially to his investments in Boeing. Now makes up exactly 5% of the portfolio. Next on the list, we have CF Industries. Now, CF Industries is a manufacturer of urea fertilizer. They are the low-cost producer. So, fertilizer typically is essentially a commodity. So, there's not a lot of ways to make your fertilizer more special than other people, and not a lot of ways that you can sell at a premium, or that a brand really helps you sell more to farmers or anything like that. So that's really a game of being the low-cost producer, and CF Industries is the low-cost producer in the industry of urea. They have very cheap access to natural gas, which is very, very important for making urea. So CF Industries, there was no change in the number of shares owned there, makes up 4.6% of Phil Town portfolio. Next up, we have Berkshire Hathaway. So Berkshire Hathaway, in my opinion, not financial advice, got really cheap earlier this year, even just within the last couple of months. And we saw Phil Town double his position in Berkshire Hathaway. So he already had 8,000 shares. He's added another 8,000 shares and now makes up 4.2% of the portfolio. Next, we have Ulta Beauty. I know nothing about this company other than they make makeup, and that's not a strong area for me, as you can probably tell. So no change in Ulta Beauty ownership, still 3.4% of the portfolio. Now, the final four positions here are really interesting for me. So the first one we have is Sharesight Growth Properties, which is a very large investment by Monish Prabhai that he has added to recently. And we saw Phil Town do something similar. So I believe Phil Town probably owned Sharesight before the big drop that happened recently. I might be wrong there, but that would be my guess. Nonetheless, he's added to it. So he's added about 37% more shares, makes up about 3% of his portfolio. He said on a live stream recently that he believes Sharesight could potentially be worth $140 a share 10 years from now. Again, don't take action on me saying that, but definitely one worth a closer look, and one I've been doing some digging on recently as well. So that makes up about 3% of his portfolio. The next one is very strange for me. So this is SPDR Gold Shares. Now, why on earth would someone like Phil Town, who follows Warren Buffett and, you know, looks at owning productive assets and all these sorts of things, be investing in gold? And I think the reason's probably twofold. One, I know Phil Town is a close follower also of Ray Dalio, even though Ray has a very different investment approach. And I think this is probably a little bit of a hedge to crazy inflation and some other things that could potentially happen with many of the extreme measures that the Federal Reserve are taking over in the US. I'm no macroeconomist or anything like that, but my guess is it's some sort of hedge. And I still think that if stocks got cheap enough, Phil Town would take that money out of gold and purchase stocks with it. I don't see him making some sort of bet on gold doing extremely well over the next few years or anything like that, really. I think that's just another store of short-term money, frankly, outside of a money market fund. So that's gold shares. Really interesting to see that in there. It wasn't in there at all in March, so it is a brand new position and makes up slightly under 3%, about 2.9% of the portfolio. Next up, we've got Gildan Activewear. So Gildan makes t-shirts. I'm wearing a Gildan t-shirt at the moment, actually. I just looked at the tag, putting this on this morning. They are one of the lower cost producers of clothing all around the world. And I know Phil Town has had a long history of investments in Gildan. He did very well during the Egyptian cotton crisis, where cotton prices got very, very high. Gildan stock went down a lot. He purchased and went back up about a year later after farmers in Georgia and so on planted cotton because prices were so good. And everything sort of worked itself out, and stock price got near enough back to normal. So I know Phil has done well in that before, and Gildan has been down a lot just over the sort of during 2020 as well. So that is that one. We had two stocks that Phil Town sold right out of. So the first one is Goldman Sachs. Again, I'm no expert on this one, but largest, most well-known investment bank in the world. I suspect he's probably cloning Buffett here because Buffett was out of Goldman Sachs as well. And same sort of thing I'd say with Southwest Airlines. So Buffett originally did have airline investments. If we rewind just probably 6 months ago, he believes that the amount of debt that these businesses are now taking on will be a massive hit to shareholder returns moving forward. So he chose to sell out of the airlines at a loss. I suspect Phil Town has basically just cloned that idea and done the same thing here. So that is a portfolio of one ETF, which is gold, the money market fund, and all of the stocks that Phil Town owns. Let's have a bit of a look through the put options, and let me talk you through what Phil is doing there. Now, buying a put option gives an investor the right, but not the obligation, to sell a stock to the person on the other side of that trade at a particular price up until a certain date. Now, that's the way that put options typically work when you buy them. In this situation, Phil Town is actually selling put options. So effectively, he's acting as almost like an insurer on the stock market or on particular businesses. So Phil Town is going out, selling put options, selling this insurance to people, collecting cash up front. Then if a stock that he has sold this insurance on does go down, people can go to Phil Town and say, okay, the stock's gone down to 50, you sold me insurance for anything below, say, 100, you have to still buy this from me at 100, even though the stock price is 50. So that's the way that these options work. Basically, the philosophy from Phil Town here is he has been writing put options on companies that he would be happy to own at these prices anyway. So basically, two things can happen. The first thing is the stock price doesn't go down. In that situation, the person who bought those options will not exercise the options because they're worthless, and they can sell their stock for more than that option strike price just in the open market. Or the second thing that can happen is Phil Town gets to buy shares in all these great companies that he wants to buy shares in at a particular price if the price does go down. The only downside here is that if it goes down more than the strike price or the exercise price on these options, he doesn't get the chance to put as much money to work at the really low prices. So if he's said he'll buy shares at 100 off people and it goes all the way down to 60 or 70, he still has to buy at 100, and he maybe can't put quite as much work money to work at the 60 or 70. But he believes that over the long term, this strategy can be quite effective. Particularly if businesses don't get as mispriced as he wants them to, and he can collect those insurance sort of premiums up front. So currently, Philtown has sold a little over about $2 million worth of put options in this particular portfolio under a few of the companies that we already see in his existing stock market portfolio, and a couple of new ones as well. So let's talk through everything that is in here. Okay, so let me put up a table here and talk you through what each of these different columns mean in this particular table. So firstly, we've got a company. These are the businesses that Philtown has sold these put options on. Next, we've got the number of contracts. So typically options contracts are dealt in units of 100 shares. So that's the number of contracts. If you look at the next column over, we've got a nominal amount. So this is basically the amount that Philtown is potentially liable for if these options are either exercised. The exercise price, so that's basically the price if the stock ever gets down below that amount, these options are more likely to be exercised. We have an expiration date, so this is sort of American dates where we have month, day, year, which always confuses me, but the expiration date is basically the length of time that these options are still valid. So these range anywhere from the next couple of months, or in fact some have already even expired as of filming this video, through to early 2021, some of them. So that's simply the length of the contract and the value. So those are the premiums for each of these contracts that Philtown has collected upfront. So hopefully that all makes sense. In terms of the contracts in here, I've just gone through and put these in alphabetical order because there are a few companies that have actually multiple contracts. And the first one we have is Armada Hoffler Properties. So we have exercise price of $9.95. Bank of America, an exercise price of $23.75. Bank OZK, an exercise price of $23.47. And the list goes on, and as I'm not going to be able to add much value by just talking through everything that's on the list here, other than to say with put options, you really don't write put options just on any random company. And I think effectively what this particular list of businesses and list of exercise prices is doing is showing us largely Philtown's watch list and businesses that he would buy at a particular price. So in a lot of ways, if we look at an option like Sharesight Growth Properties, which expired on the 17th of July, exercise price was $11.40. Essentially, Philtown is saying that, you know, at that period of time, or at that point in time, he is more than happy to buy shares in Sharesight Growth Properties for $11.40. That's basically what these contracts are saying. At least that's my interpretation of why Philtown would go down this strategy of writing put options in this way. So in terms of the other companies in there, CF Industries, Gildan Activewear, Sanderson Farms, which is actually a poultry producer, and I believe we saw that last time around with the put options portfolio as well. Sharesight, we've got Boeing in there 3 different times, so at various prices and at various different times over the next year or so as well. And Ulta Beauty, same sort of thing as Boeing. So we have actually the same price 3 different times across various dates and different sized contracts as well. So there you have it. That is Philtown's stock and options portfolio and cash holding actually as of the end of June 2020. I do hope you enjoyed the video. I have to give a big shout out to Brad Kellner for sending me the link to this particular SEC filing, which I will leave linked down in the description below as well, because this is a really tricky one to find, although it is out there if you can do the digging. So I appreciate that, Brad, and I hope everyone did enjoy the video. If you're interested in the Hatch offer, I'll put the link up on the screen again here, hatch.as/investingwithtom. If you go to that link, deposit $100 into your account, you'll get an additional $20 added. Hatch is a great platform. They've recently rebranded as well, as you will see here. Looks really cool, easy to use, and I'm a very happy customer myself. But that is all from me today, so I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.